I'd be really interested in your take on some of the benefits of diversity, particularly at that kind of global and board level.
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to thank Anne for being here at Inspirefest. I agree with you, Michelle. It's been an absolutely fabulous day. You know, I worked at IBM, a large global company, and diversity was one of our really culturally key themes. And I always felt that the reason you want diversity in a discussion, particularly when you're working on complex problems, is you need different perspectives on the problem. You can have a richer discussion, you can get to nuance, and I've experienced the fact that you can come up with much better solutions. But I want to amplify that point with something that I started thinking about more recently in my career, which is this whole idea of how do you have the next disruptive idea, particularly in the tech business where the pace is so fast. And I started, Michelle, thinking, well, how do you know who has that idea? Mm-hmm. How do you know? And can you afford to say groups of people cannot participate? I think what you do when you don't have diversity and inclusion is you put your business at risk, because nobody ever knows who has the next big blockbuster idea and how it will help your business transform and also be competitive. So I truly believe that you need all different voices at the table for nuance and rich discussion, but you also need it for competitiveness.
Julie, if I could maybe turn to you just from the point of view of startups and founders. Are you seeing diversity? How are we doing in that space?
Well, we're improving in that space. In Enterprise Ireland, we would support about 200 startup companies a year. Up until 2011, 7% of our startups had a female on the team. Mm-hmm. So really, and actually that's not much out of line with international figures. 8% of technology entrepreneurs globally are female. So our figures were slightly behind, but not a lot. It has been a very strong focus for the last 3 or 4 years within Enterprise Ireland. We looked at the issues and lack of confidence, lack of network, lack of role models, and females are more impacted by role models than men. In fact, there were so few technology startups in the female community really exacerbated the problem. And confidence was a big issue. So we worked on each of those, and the good news is last year our figures were about 22% of our startups, so a significant increase from our females. So it's encouraging, and it's something that we will continue to put a focus on. We're trying to get to that magic 50-50 number. We should be happy to see we've made progress, but we've a little bit more to go.
Raju, from your point of view in digital media, do you think that digital is changing the way in which people perceive inequality or a lack of diversity? Absolutely.
First of all, it's great to be the token diversity candidate.
And there's 3 of us and 1 of you.
Right. Wonderful. Now I know how it feels on all the other panels I've been on. I think the reason, let's take just Inspirefest or other kind of events that are happening. The ability to kind of, for technology and social media to really magnify these issues has dramatically grown in the last few years. I mean, many of you perhaps know an organization called Catalyst in the US that's been working on these issues for a long time. But for once a year, there would be an article and people would talk about it and then it'll kind of disappear. But now I think there's a lot more consciousness about this being a critical problem, and if companies are trying to kind of reach an audience that has 50% women, if they don't reflect that, there's a fundamental problem with businesses. And I think that's being really amplified by social media and technology. I mean, even the example you gave, this is of a study of, I think, 1,500 companies in the S&P last year, and they found that 5.1% of the companies have CEOs named John, 4.5% have a CEO named David, and the entire women in the 1,500 companies were 4.1%. Right? But the fact that that number is now out there and we can all talk about it is actually the power of social media and the power of technology. Absolutely. Just to add, by the way, there was only, today and tomorrow, there's only one John and one David speaking. Again, great. Right? So I think the fact that we can actually talk about it and we can kind of spread the word and more people are kind of pointing fingers at companies and CEOs saying, what are you doing about it, is only going to get more and more amplified.
And in terms of, I suppose, some things that have been successful, I mean, Julie, you mentioned some of the actions that you're taking around confidence and so on. Are there any other specific things that you would recommend to companies in terms of setting objectives or a timescale for change?
Well, certainly, and Raju has talked about the spotlight and the fact that social media can help that. One of the things in Ireland in the last year plus is the 30% Club, and that is has put a spotlight on the issue of female participation in boards. And one of the things that there's a lot of discussion on, for example, is should there be quotas in the area? Certainly, I'm not a supporter of quotas, and the 30% Club would say, actually, if you put a spotlight on something and people have to report on it, and you ask questions about it, and you get typically the chairs involved who are actually, heavily involved in terms of recruiting the boards of companies, and they put pressure on the people who are putting forward candidates to make sure that there are sufficient females coming forward. Now, you need the pipeline of people, so you also need to feed the pipeline, and that's an issue because there aren't sufficient women at middle and senior management within companies who then, come on to be the pipeline for boards typically. So I certainly think having a spotlight on the issue, and that's, if you go back to the female entrepreneurship, having that measured all the time and setting metrics for it and really saying this is important, this is what the problem is, and then do something about it. And I certainly think getting men on board is absolutely critical, because there's no point in women talking to ourselves about this topic. You have to have it as something, and it isn't be nice to women, it's actually a good business decision, because diversity leads to better decision making, and there's lots of studies which show it. So you have to have the business and commercial logic and put a spotlight on it.
Want to be in the audience next time? Click here for tickets to Inspirefest 2017.